All scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness. That is the truth not to be questioned. The question is how the scripture should be used. In which way is it useful? In taking each word of the scripture at face value, or should we mind that it was addressed to somebody with a certain goal and that it may hide in it a meaning that isn't quite literal? I've already said that children often get information in a form simplified as compared to the way it is presented to adults. That's true both for school and even more so for nursery. In the same way, information should be simplified for peoples whose languages lack words needed to expound the thing directly. You have to employ sophisticated descriptions to draw pictures of snow, ice, and even if you do that, they aren't sure to believe you. You can't tell people what is in stark contradiction with the views they're used to, that arouses rejection. And the authors of the Holy Scripture, as well as God's Spirit that was behind them all, certainly had to face all those problems. That barrier was to be overcome somehow. Let's consider how people perceived the text in those days. We should realize that they didn't know how to read. Yes, people didn't know how to read in our understanding of the world. Reading was a wisdom. They had to be initiated into it. There were just a select few who could read. I don't know about ancient Israel, but I've got information concerning the Roman Republic. For the 2nd century BC, the level of literacy there is estimated at 5%. That is about 5% of the population knew how to read. In 200 years from then, by the time of the Roman Empire, right after Jesus Christ, there was a big leap in literacy. And in the 1st century AD, the literate made up 10%. That's around as many as the number of literate people in the European countries in the 18th century. And that pertains to the Latin language, which is easy to read. It had an exact correspondence of letters and sounds. Every sound matched one letter and there were no exceptions. But the Hebrew language, which I have shown you, wasn't like that. As for the even older hieroglyphic systems of writing, they were utterly sophisticated. To learn how to read such a thing, you had to learn how to guess from the context which word is meant among the possible options. Besides, there were no spaces between the words. You had to separate them in your mind. And here again, we face problems that are used by various commentators. What if we shift the border of the word by one letter and get quite a different meaning? Why, there were no spaces. Spaces are convenience that was added later, as well as signs for vowels. By the way, in order to solve this problem, there were special shapes of some letters developed in the Hebrew language. They were written at the end of words, unlike the same letters in other positions. On the end of words, they wrote some letters a bit differently to make it clear, in this word, this letter is final. We have special capital letters for starting sentences and names. They had special final letters. So, how did they perceive the text? By hearing. They couldn't take a collection of sacred books, as we do now, 66 as well, and page it to and fro, comparing various places, writing them out. They were unable to do that. they didn't even have those books. They only kept one copy of those books in a synagogue. At best, they were kept there as a complete set. They were priceless. It may have taken a whole year to write one of them, and it cost a fortune. So that was all perceived by hearing. Somebody who could read took a book and read, while the others were listening. But we should say that with such a way of perceiving, it was impossible to do what we are used to. It's impossible to single out separate fragments of a verse, compare them with fragments of another verse, which is sometimes somewhere 25 or even 200 pages away. It's impossible to use an electronic concordance. All of that was non-existent. The perception of the text was quite different. The text had to arouse a clear, holistic image in the listener's mind. And it wasn't meant for a detailed analysis. It was impossible to stop the reader or the storyteller if he was reciting that all by heart, and to say, "Stop here, could you please repeat that word again? What have you just said? Could you utter that word separately and more distinctly? Are you sure you remember that word correctly?" They didn't do that. There was quite a different culture of auditory perception. By the way, there's the reason why Jesus didn't write anything. The people were so accustomed to perceiving oral admonitions that it was easy for them to memorize by hearing what we now have to learn by heart through texts. Yes, that's quite a different culture. And you can easily observe it, say, in Damascus. In Damascus, you go to the north for a coffee house, in the old city, behind the Umayyad mosque, and there is a storyteller, such a local Arab culture. The storyteller is sitting and telling. I don't know what he is telling. I don't understand Arabic so much as to get the words of the storyteller in the Nofra coffee house, but he speaks there for hours and hours, and they like it. And they are listening and listening to him. And for those who could read, it was still a problem to write. Because one thing is to read what has been written, and another thing to write things down. You all know that even native speakers have trouble spelling English words. So illogical it sometimes is. One thing is to read a familiar word, another thing is to spell it correctly. It's a special wisdom. I mean, there was an exclusive club of those who were able to read, reading experts. And there was another, even more exclusive, secret club of those who were able to write, writing experts. That knowledge was highly valued and people were paid tremendous money for that. That's why in ancient Egypt, the profession of a scribe was thought to be the most qualified of all possible ones. There is an admonition from ancient Egyptian nobleman Heti, left to his son Pepi, where he explains that there are lots of jobs in the world. All of them are good, but scribes, they are the best. So you should become a scribe, my son. There wasn't anybody cooler than scribes. And we should realize that for such members of a secret club of readers and writers, the authors could add some even more exciting twists that could be seen only through personal reading, not through listening. That's why teaching everyone by means of telling an easy-to-grasp story was one thing, and a special instruction for people who could see the text and knew how to read it, another one. And there, they exercised such methods, proceeding from their Jewish letters and their comparisons, that we just can't think of. They used to divide words into various parts and start analyzing them. The word Adam, it consists of 3 letters. Yes, 3. Aleph, Dalet, Mim, not 4. What do we have in this Adam? Oh, there is Dalet and Mim, that is Dam. What is Dam? What do we get if we separate one letter from the word Adam? We get the word Dam, which means blood. Wow! So why is there an Aleph? Aleph is the first letter of the word Elohim, which means God. Wow, that is Adam, is Elohim, God, plus blood. That was completely in earnest. That's a typical reasoning of Jewish sages over each page of the Holy Scripture. That was the way they broke down all the words. What will happen if we cut this letter off and see it as a separate word? And what will we get if we change the vowels? We'll get a double sense. Wow! Then we'll come to Adam being like Adom. And there is also Adama. I mean, they employed similar words and used them to figure out an even broader meaning, which doesn't follow from the word Adam in English at all, and isn't clear to us. Because what does the word Adam, that stands for man, have in common with the word for red and the word for soil? Man, red, and soil aren't alike, but to them they were. To them they were derived from the same root, or at least they seem to be. Adam is man, Adom is red, Adama is soil. By the way, why is soil red? It is black, isn't it? Well, here we have to proceed from the situation those people were living in. They weren't living in Kansas or Manitoba. They were living in the Middle East, and there we find soil with a reddish hue. It isn't good nutrition for wheat, but some other things grow there quite well. So all of that, red soil and man, interact in the minds of the club for those who know how to read Hebrew. In the translation, all of that gets lost. We have just mentioned a point that is only clear if we consider a broader context than that inside a text, the context of a whole geographical zone and a culture that was formed there. Yes, soil is red, not black. And next time we'll talk about something else that follows from the fact that the text was born in another region.